Have you ever found yourself just staring at an unread email, feeling completely paralyzed by it?
Oh, definitely. Or that feeling you get when someone just says, "Hey, can we talk?" Instant dread. It's gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if that sounds familiar, well, you might be tapping into something a whole generation really understands. We're talking about Gen Z.
Yeah.
They've got all this access, incredible technology, more awareness about mental health than ever before. So
Yeah.
why are they also the most anxious generation?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Today, we're going deep. We want to explore the unexpected reasons, the stuff under the surface driving Gen Z's anxiety. We're moving way past the easy answers like, too much TikTok or blaming avocado toast.
And it's really important, I think. This isn't just about understanding one generation. What the research shows us, it's actually a window into how connection and well-being are changing for everyone. So this dive into the data, the insights. It's not just about what's happening to Gen Z. It really gets into why it matters to all of us. It kind of maps out the pressures shaping how we all navigate the modern world.
Hmm.
It's like a blueprint for anxiety today.
Okay, let's start unpacking that. Our sources point to some really compelling factors.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one, it feels almost too obvious, but
Yeah.
the impact is just massive. Let's call it the digital earthquake.
Right. This sheer scale of it, it's completely transformative. I mean, think about previous generations. We remember a time before the internet, right? Yeah.
Riding bikes, getting lost,
Yeah.
no GPS, calling a landline and hoping someone was home.
Exactly. But Gen Z, they basically had smartphones before hitting puberty. They didn't just discover social media, they were like born right into a world already swimming in it.
And that changes everything about growing up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The sources really hammer this home. Imagine being, I don't know, 12, 13,
Yeah.
and every single insecurity you feel at that age, every trend, every perfect-looking influencer life, every single global crisis,
Mhm.
it's just constantly there, in your pocket, like 24/7.
It's relentless.
You're seeing your own face next to some highly filtered influencer photo. You're scrolling past news about, I don't know, war, climate change, celebrity drama, all before you've even had breakfast.
Precisely. And the internet, which we thought would just connect everyone, well, the sources argue it's become this huge amplifier for pressure. It's not just the amount of information, it's how immediate it is, how it's just everywhere.
There's no off switch.
Not really. Every bit of news, every social comparison, every pressure to perform or achieve, it's always right there. There's rarely a real break, mentally or emotionally, and that just profoundly shapes how they see the world and their place in it. Our sources even suggest it subtly changed attention spans, made it harder to focus on things that aren't immediate, like a kind of digital ADHD, which then fuels more anxiety about not being productive enough.
That's a really interesting point about attention. And yes, speaking of productivity and pressure, that leads straight into the next big theme from our sources, the achievement trap.
Mm.
Gen Z, they grew up hearing these two messages that just totally clash, often at the same time. On one hand, it's like, you can be anything. The world's your oyster.
Limitless potential.
Right, that
Yeah.
aspirational message.
But then, right alongside it, there's this crushing voice saying, well, if you're not a millionaire by 25, you're basically failing. It's a total double bind, isn't it? It absolutely is. That's the definition caught between two demands where you can't win, and it makes you question this whole hustle culture thing that's just everywhere now. The sources really highlight how this environment, the constant rise and grind, the push for side hustles, it creates this feeling of nonstop competition. It's not just about doing well, it's about looking like you're doing well.
Yeah.
So even simple things like taking a nap can suddenly feel like you're falling behind. You're not grinding, you're not optimizing, you're not posting your wins.
And it seeps into everything, even hobbies. Things you do just for fun, to relax. You like painting? Okay, cool. Now how can you sell it? Start an Etsy store, build a brand, go viral.
Exactly. The underlying question is always sort of, why isn't this making money? Why aren't you famous yet?
It sounds exhausting.
It is. And what's really striking is how this creates this constant, background hum of stress, anxiety that just never fully goes away. When everything, even your downtime, is framed as a chance to compete and monetize, well, true rest feels almost impossible. It's just this relentless cycle, always more to do, another goal to hit, another success to share online. It fuels anxiety because the finish line keeps moving.
Okay, so we've got the digital overload, we've got this intense achievement pressure. But let's be real for a second. The sources are very clear. The world is, well, kind of a mess. Gen Z didn't just inherit smartphones. They inherited a world that feels like it's genuinely struggling.
Oh.
We're talking Climate change speeding up, mass shootings becoming terrifyingly common, a global pandemic shaping their key years, constant political chaos.
Yeah.
It's the backdrop to their lives.
And connecting back to the digital point, their phones constantly, relentlessly remind them. The sources use this really stark example like, ding, new notification, planet's still dying.
Wow.
It's not just knowing about these problems. It's the constant, instant updates. Often the worst case scenarios. You hear older generations say sometimes, oh, we didn't have this anxiety back in my day.
Right.
But the sources push back hard on that. They say basically, well, back in your day, you didn't get hourly updates about the potential collapse of civilization. It sounds dramatic, but for them, that information overload is reality.
That's such a powerful way to frame it. It really shifts the perspective on their anxiety, doesn't it? It's not just some vague feeling or a character flaw.
Exactly. It raises a really important question. Is a lot of Gen Z's anxiety actually rational, a logical response to being constantly aware of truly massive global issues? When you're bombarded with crises and you don't see clear solutions, feeling anxious might just be, well, an understandable reaction. It might not be fragility, but maybe a reflection of the world they've been handed.
Right. Okay, so add that huge weight to the digital pressures and the achievement trap. But then there's this other really interesting paradox the sources bring up, the disconnected connection.
Yeah.
Gen Z is like the most digitally connected generation ever. Millions of followers, online friends. But at the same time, they report feeling more alone than previous generations. How does that even work? It feels totally contradictory.
It does, but what's fascinating is how the sources break down the difference between digital connection and real human connection. You can instantly ping someone halfway across the world, sure, share a meme, like a post, easy. But talking to someone face-to-face, one source described it almost like diffusing a bomb.
Wow.
It highlights how digital interaction, texting, DMs gives you this safety net. You can edit, delete, think about your response, even just ghost someone if it gets awkward.
Whereas face-to-face is messy. It's immediate, vulnerable, no backspace key.
Exactly. And this preference for the safer, more controlled digital space can actually be really isolating. The sources put it so powerfully. You can have thousands of followers, but no one to call when they're crying in the bathroom.
Oof, that hits hard.
Yeah. This focus on the quantity of digital ties over the quality of real supportive relationships can lead to this deep sense of loneliness. And connecting it back, this digital isolation really impacts mental well-being because we're fundamentally wired for that deep, authentic connection, not just performing online.
Which leads us right into another paradox, maybe the most complex one, the mental health paradox. Gen Z talks about mental health more openly than any generation before. It's everywhere. Therapy memes, self-care posts, people listing anxiety, almost like a personality trait online. On the surface, that seems like huge progress, right? All this talking.
It does seem like progress, and in many ways, the openness is progress. But the paradox, the real insight here, is that talking about mental health isn't the same as getting effective help. So while Gen Z is incredibly aware, sometimes hyper-aware, of their struggles, the sources show they're also just overwhelmed by the barriers to actually getting better.
Why is that?
Well, it's a few things. Therapy is often crazy expensive. Mental health services are overloaded, wait lists are long, and schools, even with good intentions, might offer things like, meditation once a week, which isn't really equipped to handle serious anxiety or depression.
So they're kind of stuck. They know they're anxious. They talk about being anxious maybe online or with friends, which is brave.
Yeah.
But then finding the actual tools, the affordable resources, the sustained support to heal, that's often missing.
Exactly. It's like being really good at diagnosing the flu but having no access to medicine. The awareness is there, absolutely, but the path to actually feeling better is often blocked or just too hard to navigate.
It raises that critical question, doesn't it? How can they be so vocal but feel so unsupported?
It really points to a bigger systemic issue, a gap between recognizing the problem and having the actual infrastructure to address it effectively. It's not just on them, it's a societal challenge.
Okay, looking at all this, the digital chaos, the pressure cooker, the scary world news, the loneliness paradox, the struggle for real help, it's easy to feel pretty bleak.
It can sound that way, yeah.
But here's where our sources take a really crucial turn, and honestly, it's quite hopeful. Despite everything, despite the anxiety, Gen Z is consistently described as incredibly resilient.
This is so important. This is where you see their strength. They are talking, they are sharing, they're building these safe spaces online and offline in ways previous generations often just couldn't. Things were buried deep down,
Yeah.
hidden by stigma.
Yeah, the stiff upper lip approach,
Right. Gen Z is basically redefining strength. It's not about pretending you're fine, toughing it out. It's about honesty, emotional intelligence, being vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm struggling. This sources emphasize this generation is funny, they're sharp, they're deeply empathetic, and they're surprisingly proactive. They're creating communities where it's genuinely okay not to be okay.
So in a weird way, their openness, which maybe comes partly from their shared anxiety,
Right.
that's actually their superpower.
Right.
They're breaking down those old walls.
Precisely. And connecting this to the bigger picture, this generation, just by being so aware and so willing to talk about mental health openly, they are going to force the world to take it more seriously than ever before. Their anxiety, yeah, it's painful, but it's also acting as a catalyst. It's driving
Uh-huh.
change. That awareness is the absolutely essential first step towards real systemic improvements, better care, more understanding, truly supportive communities. They're not just sitting with the problem, they're pushing the conversation forward, often creating solutions themselves.
So if you're listening right now, and maybe you identify with some of this, maybe you're Gen Z yourself, or a parent, a teacher, a friend,
Uh,
here's what the sources really want you to take away. You're not broken. You're definitely not weak. You're navigating a really complex, chaotic time with, honestly, more empathy and awareness than many people know what to do
yeah,
with.
absolutely. And what's fascinating is how simple yet profound some of the grounding advice is. Things that get lost in the noise, like actually take a breath. Sometimes just put the phone down for a bit.
Easier said than done sometime.
Totally. But important. And talk to someone who really gets it, face to face if you can, or just in a way that feels genuinely human and connected. These aren't magic fixes, but they are crucial steps back towards balance, towards rebuilding those connections that maybe the digital world can't quite replicate.
Yeah. And hey, if this deep dive maybe helped you feel a little more seen or understood or just less alone in all this, well, then I think we've done our job here today. Because the thing about anxiety, our source really suggests this, is that the more we actually talk about it, the more we build those real vulnerable connections, the lighter that burden can start to feel, not just for ourselves, but collectively. So maybe just reflect on this. How can you, starting today, help create a slightly more empathetic, more supportive space? Not just for others, but maybe, just maybe, for yourself too.